So I want to take this time to welcome everybody to the conversation. I'm Not Your Superwoman, a conversation with Ardina Garth Hicks, my mother, and Sarah Hicks Bailey, my younger sister. So, we're going to be having a conversation where we're just going to talk about the Black woman superhero myth, individual responsibility versus collective responsibility, and what support for Black women and femmes should look like. So, a little bit of note before we start. This is going to be recording, as you all know, and it will be shared out later. Also, if you notice, there's an Instagram here that you all are more than welcome to follow. Highlights from this discussion will be placed there. And last but not least, please, we just ask that you hold your questions to the end. There is a Q&A function that I'll be monitoring towards the end of our discussion. However, if you feel like, yes, I agree, or you just want to say words of encouragement, anything like that, please feel free to drop it in the chat. And with that, I wanted to start off before we did introductions, reading a passage from Unapologetic, a Black queer and feminist mandate for radical movements by Charlene A. Carruthers, aka the first book that my mother and I read during our book club. So the passage starts with, a single person cannot lead a successful movement. Each of us has a role in the work of movement building and must assume that responsibility. As we amass freedoms and experience collective liberation, which I believe is possible, we cannot recycle the master's tools, systems, or thinking. The movement must commit to leadership development, healing justice, and combating liberalism through principled struggle. So that is from the conclusion of Unapologetic, a Black queer and feminist mandate for radical movements by Charlene A. Carruthers. And with that, I'll go ahead and get started with introductions. So thank you all for attending today. I have two very special guests that I'm incredibly proud to have this conversation with. The first is my mama, Ardina Garth Hicks. She was the first Black, first woman, and first Black woman, yes, identities intersect and compound, to serve as the public defender of Hamilton County. As the president of Chattanooga Endeavors, she helps state prisoners returning home get a second chance. Currently, she is continuing to work as an attorney assisting with family and child advocacy cases. So, Mama, if you could give the people a wave real quick, just say hello, hi.
Hello, hi.
Thank you. All righty. And next is my beloved younger sister, Sarah Hicks Bailey, a graduate from the University of Tulsa with her degrees. Yes, she has two bachelors in business management and French. Sarah works for Ceres, on sustainability initiatives that have global implications. So, Sarah, if you don't mind just giving the people a wave and a hi, how you doing?
Hey there.
Thank you. So today we will be having an intergenerational conversation on Black women responsibility and how important equity is to collective care. So, Mama and Sarah, this is our conversation. We talk how we talk. So I'll start off with the first question. How has responsibility been explained to you as a Black woman? So how has responsibility been explained to you as a Black woman?
As a Black woman, responsibility was explained to me that I could do whatever I wanted to do as long as I did the best I could. That's what I was taught. And then as I begin to move through my career and doing other things, I begin to realize that responsibility involved being indispensable. I couldn't do everything. Like when I was I had my clerking job with the state legislature, and the one lady who clerked with me, the white woman, she could type, but I couldn't. And I was told by my professional organizations, don't go in typing or they'll make you type.
Mm.
Sure enough, they tried to let me type, and they used more whiteout than not. So, so therefore, my thing was, let me do those other things. So I always wanted to do. I found out if you volunteer to do those things that nobody really wants to do, that's making yourself indispensable. So that's what I looked at as always responsibility.
Yeah, Mommy, I think the way that you've described it is definitely the way that I recollect my upbringing.
I
responsibility
was
for the
there. Yeah, I was there.
I mean, I'm not trying to frame something that like happened or didn't happen. Uh, but I think the way you and daddy raised us was very much so like you are responsible to do the best that you can. You decide what your best looks like, but there needs to be some kind of agreement between what you produce, what you're on the line to produce, and it needs to be up to that standard that you set for yourself. So I feel like we had a lot of freedom in our upbringing to really like set our own levels, and when we didn't meet our own expectations of what we were capable for, you guys were more so upset about that than you were about like you should be doing X, Y, and Z. So I feel like, and Rachel, really correct me again if this is not how you recollect our childhood, but responsibility from my own unique perspective was very, it was a positive thing. It was what do I feel like I can handle? Now, in terms of like responsibility, what's put upon us, like
Mm.
when you grow up in puberty, you start like interacting with, you know, people of the opposite gender, gender roles start coming into that conversation. Ooh, like I didn't love that. So I think from a professional perspective and from a personal responsibility perspective, I feel like I've always understood those lines well. But I feel like in terms of like societal expectations, gender expectations of responsibility, those aren't my favorite.
Who had a party to go to the prom for the girls that didn't have dates? And the
I mean,
party was so popular that even the one friend that had a date brought her date to the party.
That was fun.
and that actually, Mama, I'm glad you brought that up because like being the older sibling, there's levels to responsibility that I don't think that we as a society really look at. Like that because we don't really view our identities as intersections that like exist at the exact same time. And so I know that how I've understood responsibility, Sarah, is more so of like as your older sibling, I'm responsible for you. Like with my parents, you know, with y'all being older, I do feel responsible for you all as you all, you know, get older in age and things like that. So that's a
Oh, so
generational
you're saying we're
responsibility.
old? Yeah. Okay.
I didn't
I'm
say
old.
that. I didn't say that, but I'm saying like you know with the different generations, like that generational responsibility. I know that I personally feel the responsibility of you know just being black in America. There's that. And then on top of that, you know, with my new gender identity of being a non-binary femme, I do, especially in this space where I'm the only person that is identifying in that way with my gender, I do feel a responsibility to, you know, advocate even harder, which I won't dive too much into that. But I'm glad that you all opened us up to talking about the different levels of responsibility and how it shows up. So I have a supplemental question. Um, Understanding that responsibility is something that like we individually take on usually, how have you all shared responsibility, and in that sharing of responsibility how did it impact, or if it didn't that's okay too, but how did it impact your black woman identity? So if you've had to share responsibility or if you've ever experienced sharing responsibility, how did that go, and then how did that play into your black woman identity?
Um, the one thing that I can say is that, and I think that was one of the things I did enjoy when I was public defender, was that I could always say I was the one that could design what my responsibility was. I could I was the one that could make certain decisions, and the background for that decision was when people talked about what I did, and I always told my staff this too. If people want to criticize us for doing something or complain about us, the one thing that they weren't going to complain about is that we didn't do our jobs right. we
Mm.
we showed up. We made sure we were there fighting for people. Your Aunt Marianne, she's a lady that worked with me, and we were great together as a staff. But one of the things she loved about the office was that we had a list by your hiring date, was the list that you went to jail if a judge put me in jail for not doing what I wanted to do. You knew your job wasn't to please the judge, your job was to please me. So therefore there's this desire to be responsible, but you've got to have that bottom line part is going to be they can say whatever they want to say. They can call you whatever they want to call you. But one of the things aren't going to say you is that you weren't giving all to people who couldn't pay you if they wanted to. But at the same time, you treated everybody the same, regardless of their resources or what they had or who they were. So they could say when you showed up to give your best.
Thanks, Mama. Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about this question and I'm just thinking about my partner. Probably like the toughest thing about existing in 2020, compounding with like everything else that went on in the world. Um, One of
In
the more
Tulsa,
in Tulsa,
living in
Oklahoma.
Tulsa, and
Uh,
choosing to live in Tulsa.
I mean, I decisions were made.
Choices.
But I think one of the biggest conversations I had to have this past year was like talking to my partner about our shared responsibility, him being a white cisgendered straight man, and me being a black woman. How do we share responsibility in our household of advocating for each other?
Mm.
How can he better advocate for me? How can he use his ability to like take up space to bring my voice into the discussion? I think it takes a lot of frankness and honesty, but also patience and care to have that kind of conversation. I know like confronting privilege and internal biases and things like that is like always an ongoing conversation. But when you bring into the fact that like I love and live with this person, now I'm married to this person, and you're still having these discussions, you're like, okay, how do I like throw this in with the fact that like our dishwasher's broken and I need him to fix it? We're also going to have this talk about like, hey, and in this space, can you, mention this and advocate for this? So I feel really grateful those discussions, though they have been like had over a long period of time. I do feel like we're in a really good space where we understand the identities within our household and how they're perceived in the world and in the space around us. um and I feel comfortable, he feels comfortable, we're in a space where like it's like symbiotic almost, we're just continuing to advocate, continuing to try to understand, and continuing to like just have each other's backs fully, which is really nice. I'd say that's probably like shared responsibility in my brain right now is touching on my household.
I'm very glad that you shared that because I think that you're in a unique spot, Sarah, with a partner whose identity is completely on the opposite end of the spectrum from yours. And then there are multiple dynamics in regards to privilege and access that you all experience. And so hearing that in that shared responsibility, it necessitates advocacy and it's a constant, you all are constantly in struggle with each other. And that's something that's not bad. It's just a fact of the matter. And just to hear y'all, I love Braden. Shout out to Braden. It just warms my heart, and I love to hear that that's what y'all got going on. So I'm gonna keep it moving. As Black women from different generations, Mama and Sarah, obviously you both have different approaches to assuming responsibility. And we know all too well how society loves to rely on Black women to save the day or to be the superhero, the superheroine. At the same time, we know how neglected and disrespected Black women are in our society. Understanding the social demands of being both Black and a woman, how have you all examined what I like to call the responsibility knapsack? And the responsibility knapsack is a pack that Black folks have placed on their backs by the elites of society. So um, how do you all just begin to unpack that responsibility knapsack?
The first thing is, and shout out to your dad, because you wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. We would all starve if it weren't for him. We, we
He is the better cook, mommy, I'm sorry.
hey, no, 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 no. I could do my thing. but we know our lanes.
We do know how.
We know our lanes, and so that's, hey, don't forget your dad and the carrot cake he made that was
Shout out to Daddy and the
pretty
carrot cake.
fast. Yeah.
It had
But
raisins
but
in
the
it.
issue was, but the first thing was, know what you're good at and then stay out of the way. I love my husband and I love the fact that I can sit down on a Sunday afternoon and say, honey, what's for dinner? And, he feeds us the whole time. He keeps us fed, he keeps us happy. But at the same time, I don't rely on him to wire the house when we got a new VCR. That was
Mm,
my role. So therefore, know what your strengths are and understand, if you are trying to be everything to everybody,
mm.
no, that does not work. You find out what you do, and then you do it to your best ability.
Wow.
You don't do it for how many likes you get or how many dislikes you get it. You do it because that's what you choose to do. And I think that's one of the things I think that's real powerful is that, like, at the end of my term being public defender, I love being public defender. It was a wonderful job. And I would have loved to have left it on my own terms, as far as on this day I choose to leave it.
Hmm.
But there were other reasons for it to happen. I always think about it, for 25 years. And you have to understand Hamilton County, a place in Hamilton County, Tennessee, because there's a Hamilton County someplace else, but I want to say Hamilton County, Tennessee. We've got a place that was less than 20% black. And I won an election. I won three different elections.
In
And,
4 years
and
of service.
yeah, and
Hmm.
but at the end of it, it was my job to keep. So that was another great, powerful thing that, as much as people may want to put it on my knapsack and my backpack and say, what could I have done to stay elected? One of the things some people said I should have done was switch parties. Your mama ain't gonna let me in heaven. Your grandmama ain't gonna let me in heaven if I switch parties.
Granny not
But then
gonna let
again,
you in heaven. I will. First of all,
but 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 after we read our book, Rachel, I hey, a label is a label, and if it's a troublemaker, it's just something I got to deal. But I couldn't get into heaven by switching labels. Plus, also that would have made it my control, not everything else that's working in this world. And
yeah.
so, therefore, the issue is, it, when I have the backpack, let me make sure it's what I put in there. Make sure
Mm,
it's what I want to deal with. Make sure it's what I want to be responsible for. Make sure it's what I want to learn about. And then after, like I said, after the books you've been introducing me and how to be, how to definitely deal with the liberation battle. I got to do it my history because like you were reading about Ida B. Wells. I want her. I want her going, hey, I'm with you. I want to make sure that we're going to stand up because Ida B. Wells had her issues with black men, didn't want her to come forward. She also had to deal with the women who were acting special. So therefore, there's history out there. So the issue is, let me make sure that I'm doing what I want to do, and there's not a racist component that to. And then I have to understand I have to deal with my own issues. I have to deal with my own problems. And as old as I am, I have to understand I don't know everything. I
mm,
don't know how to treat everybody. And I'm learning that where you used to could sit back and you could judge people based on what fork or knife they used. Now I have to go up and say, if I don't know how you identify, that shouldn't change how I interact with you.
mm.
So that's how I did with the knapsack. Let me put in it what I want. I want to carry it. Because Sarah's enlightened me that there's certain things in the woods I may want to see. So therefore, I may have to have a backpack for the purposes, but
Yeah.
not just to weigh me down, because you want to keep me under the presumptions that white supremacy is the mainstay. Nah, don't think so.
Mm. That's a word.
When it comes down to like the knapsack and sort of like people just putting responsibility on you, as someone who definitely takes a lot of pride in their work and things that they're passionate about, I had to learn how to separate my feelings of capability from what people were putting on me.
Mm,
Like, I don't have to doubt my capability if I just don't want to tolerate what someone is trying to put on me. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't
Yeah.
have to, if you said it, I got it. I picked up on it.
I think we're told when we're like handed this knapsack, like people are going to put stuff in it, and that means you should do it. And,
Mm,
that's definitely, I think when you're trying to teach responsibility to someone in like the early stages of their life, like, sure, yeah, wash your clothes, go take a shower. Basic life needs and things like that are going to come at you, and you should
right.
be responsible for taking care of that. But I do think like the nuance of that lesson later on in life is very rarely taught, which is not everything that comes your way is going to be your responsibility, but it does not in any way, shape, or form make you less capable if you choose to let it fall away.
Can we let that sit for a second? And then I want you to repeat it. All right, please repeat it.
I mean, just because someone puts something on you and you decide to step away from it does not in any way, shape, or form make you less capable.
And also, the other benefit is that you can come back and get it later.
Yeah.
Duh. Your daddy and I tap dancing.
Oh,
We didn't
Okay.
see. You
Okay,
see,
now hold on.
I gotta take you there. I gotta take you there. And think about it. We got to be tap dancers at a time when people were trying to, we weren't trying to be professional with it. We were just trying to keep up with each other. But because we didn't get to tap dance when we were younger, didn't mean that we couldn't tap dance. Because don't forget, black folks, we went to piano lessons, and you sung in the choir, and you went to church. We didn't get a chance to tap dance,
Mm,
but when we found out we could, we took it on. What was
I
it that man?
mean,
What was it that kid told your daddy that time? There's a daddy on the stage.
yes. When we did, okay, point of privilege. When we did Me and My Shadow,
I was
and
the
we had
shadow.
those canes, and we all we did was a 1, 2, back it on up. 3, 4, back. We go grab a family member as we keep on hustling. That was honestly one of the most memorable things that I have of us as a family doing that. And it didn't click to me like, oh, these are my parents that are older that are like tap dancing. Until that one time, I think y'all left and y'all came back and you were like, ice, heat. Don't talk to us. So I thought that was I'm glad that you brought that up, and I love
Yeah.
that
Hey,
story.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Having Sarah come in and participate, that was special.
It
Even
was
though it was brief, she only did the
wonderful,
very last part of the song.
and it worked, and I loved how that's a great example. I'm glad you brought it up of everybody having their part and not trying to do more. Like Daddy had all of the steps because he was the first one leading out. You had the second most because you were like we all knew where we were supposed to be, and Sarah being last, it didn't mean that we didn't value her as much. Honestly, we were doing age. So if we're going in age order, then Sarah is last. But I really appreciate y'all for sharing for sharing how y'all handle that knapsack. I think it's important, Mama. You made a great point about how, there may be stuff in the woods you want to see later. So you do want that knapsack. And Sarah, I love how it was very impactful for me to hear you say, just because people put stuff in there, it doesn't mean that it's your responsibility. And if you choose to say no, it doesn't take away from your capability. That's huge.
oh,
That's
and can I
very
add another point in there? Feel free to deny people access to your knapsack. Like, if you are constantly railing against people who don't respect your boundaries, that don't respect parts of you that are important, that it like respect and responsibility, I feel like are always like so tandem.
mm,
Like, you can't ask someone for their action, their space, their breath, their being, their responsibility without offering them respect and understanding what all that ask is trying to pull from them. If someone is just like taking layups and shooting threes into your responsibility knapsack and you don't feel that respect, like knapsacks have zippers.
I love it.
But
Now,
Walk
but let
away.
but let me also add one of the things that I had to deal with a certain situation with a judge that was upset with the way I was handling my office, and I had to. I got an ass chewing about every time I went to court.
Mm.
But the worst he could do to me were words. He could not take my life. He could not stop me from being public defender. And once I realized his power, it was like, okay, go ahead, take your best shot. But later on, I had other people come back and tell me the biggest mistake he ever made was chewing my butt out because it's recorded. Like our Aunt Mary Ann, she made sure that it was documented in history. It's if you ever want to look it up, give me a call. I'll tell you where it is. But but the issue is we're so afraid of what people are going to do. But what's the worst they could do? If they hurt your feelings, that means you know where they're coming from. What was it? They don't get invited to potato salad. They get the potato salad with the cranberries in it, not the best potato salad.
I was gonna do the Chadwick Boseman, R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman thing. But you said cranberries in the potato salad, and I'm done after
They get the cranberries in the potato salad, and they don't get invited to the Thanksgiving dinner.
the
They
Thanksgiving
they,
dinner.
they lose their black card and everything else that all the good don't get the carrot casserole. They don't get my mac and cheese, and
The mac and
and
cheese.
they don't get the things that the mama's pound cake. What's
Okay,
mama's pound cake like?
look, the best thing
Well,
ever.
the one you sent me is gone now.
I was about to say mine is almost gone too. I'm gonna keep us moving though. This is great, and I don't want to steamroll over a point that you made, Mama, but knowing the power that others have is important. Because I mean, one philosophy that I live by is like, and excuse my language, but there's nobody that can whoop my behind. I didn't cuss, so there we go. There's nobody that can whoop my behind, and that I know pushes me to do a lot of the things that I do as far as like advocating and standing in the gap and organizing and things like that. But once you take that power away by knowing what's in your knapsack, what your capabilities are, what your demands for respect are, like where your limits are when it comes to responsibility is key. And also, and you do have to know those other folks, like what can they do or what's the worst that they can do to you. And that's something that we define, and I thought that was really really key, so thank you for that. I'm gonna keep us pushing, so this is where we get real. I don't know why I put it in quotes, but we've seen Stacey Abrams and other Black women and Black femme organizers do the heavy lifting to put a white man and a Black and South Asian woman into the highest positions of power. We have also witnessed Black women like Anita Hill be publicly humiliated and shamed for speaking out about harm she experienced by the same man that Black women put into power. Mind trip, right? We live in the age of hashtag say her name. As Black women are dying at the hands of police violence at alarming high rates, we've seen Black women like Shirley Chisholm pave the way for Black women in politics, encouraging all Black folks, especially this Black non-binary femme, to quote unquote bring the folding chair to the table. We have heard the Black women quote unquote mule stereotype, and I hear currently just Malcolm X passionately proclaiming the most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. So I said a lot, and understanding that there is much that is heaped on Black women and femmes, and little is given to Black women and femmes by way of relief, resources, etc. How do you all shape responsibility for yourselves? Like, what do you take on and what do you leave? So, how do you determine, like, yes, this is what I'm gonna take on, or no, I'm not doing that?
I kind of feel like the thing that came to mind first to me is like, what can I share and what would I be taking on fully as my own responsibility? Um, yeah, I didn't have a fully formed thought there. I just kind of started talking. But what I think I'm getting at is like the line should be, as always, like what is going to put me in the best frame of mind, what's not going to harm my well being, especially my mental well being.
Mm.
So I really only try to pick up things that I feel like I can share with others. Like, where can I find shared responsibility with women, with Black people, with Black women, or Black femmes? Like, where can I find those points of, where can I find a network to help me shoulder this? Because I feel
Mm,
like that's whenever I feel like I have to shoulder some responsibility, especially something as large as like societal pressures and responsibility, identity issues, feminist issues, things like that. If I feel like I'm shouldering that all by myself, like that's the quickest way that I'm going to burn out.
mm.
So when it comes down to like, what do I take on? What do I leave? It's like, I need partners. I need a network. If I can find a network that is like in that space, I'll take it on and share it there. Um, but that's pretty much my first thought.
What, excuse me. I think one of the things that I see with the current things that are happening, and nothing news under the sun. Think about what was happening during Reconstruction and what was happening after Reconstruction. I still remember a history class, a women's, no, it was a history of modern America that I took when I was in undergrad, and I remembered when you studied this. This is one of the few teachers that taught everything like on a in a subject level, and you're dealing with international rights, you're dealing with the economy, you're dealing with all these other things, and everything was moving up in the world from the end of the Civil War until the 1940s. The only thing that went continually down was race relations and what was going on with Black people. And I had a teacher teaching that. And how many, I mean, that was at MTSU even at the time, but I thought it was really powerful. And I even asked questions. I said, everything else went great, but for Black people? And she said, yeah, this is what was happening.
Mm.
So the issue for me is that I have allowed myself to make different choices because my choice today may be different than when you guys were home, and it's a little different as I get older. But one of the things that I'm staying with is my love right now for Angela Davis. I mean, this woman survived the the criminal justice system, the American criminal injustice complex. She dealt with the FBI. She had Ronald Reagan saying that she was the worst thing since sliced bread. She had Richard Nixon saying she was the worst thing since sliced bread. But this woman is still with us now, and her stories are, I'm sitting here reading about her trial going, why didn't anybody teach this stuff when I was in law school? Her trial and stuff happened, ooh, I want to say mid mid 70s, maybe I know when I was looking at it, there should have been some identification of what was going on with her and me in my career as I was learning things. But one of the things is that nothing's changed. It's still a criminal messed up complex. And
Mhm.
it treats, when you see how she was on the FBI's most wanted list, not for something she did, but because she was she had a registered gun that in California where it was legal to have guns,
Mhm.
there was a shooting. Everybody who got killed did not get killed by that gun,
Mhm.
but she was facing the death penalty for that. And
Mm.
we've got people storming the Capitol, and a person dies. And I'm waiting to see. I've yet to see anybody be charged with murder
Or
because, like I
that
said,
responsibility.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, if this was a bank robbery and she had a gun, she would be charged with the people that got killed with that gun.
And she
But
would be
that's not.
responsible. She would be
But that's
held
not.
responsible for
Yeah.
that.
But that's not. So it's two different justice systems. So therefore, I'm learning, and I'm excited about that. And the other thing about, um, I think, what we need to make sure that we do is educate ourselves and be flexible, because we have to understand, like President Johnson did. He was the one that you know did he made he signed off on the civil rights bill, but he had a real bad history. but we had to give them credit for the civil rights bill. But we have to be able to, to do two things at once. I can't say I'm going to take his name off of a school building if they named him. I mean, yes, Linda Baines Johnson's name I could handle on the school building. Let me get rid of Robert Lee Lee. That's a problem. But I can deal with you. But I think the issue is making sure that you educate yourself. You understand it's not about somebody else's absolute control over you, but what you can take in. And I love Eddie Glaude as he was dealing, as he was studying James Baldwin, understanding that as things happen that may not go the way I may want them, instead of getting all crazy about, I'm going to put that person on my hate list and I'm not going to do this, they're not going to get no money from me. I got to be ready to begin again if I lose this time. Because think about it, we still here and we must be winning and they want to they want to make us think we're not, but we got to be ready to begin again. You can't let if you can't let what happened even from what was happening in Europe and all those other places before America was created. We got to understand we're in a crazy place at a crazy time, and it's global. Global, global, global. So that I'm just saying, you got to learn. You got to pick your champions. Ida B. Wells, I want her T-shirt. Rachel, I say thank you because
You
I got my shirt on. I love my blackness.
I love it. I love it. Though if I could really put you and Sarah's responses together to make one manual on like how to determine how to like share as well as like not share in responsibilities, I think that's important. I think there does have to be, as you said, Sarah, like what can I do well? What can I pick up and do well? And Mama, what you said, there does need to be that education and flexibility component because I don't think that you can share responsibility if you're rigid and you also don't fully understand like where that responsibility is being shared. I thought that it was very important, Mama, that you listed, just comparing like Angela Davis and her being arrested and being basically that's an example of like you're responsible for this, we're putting this on you, we're putting it in your knapsack. And that's actually something that's very violent because we know that the prison industrial complex has a history of just doing nothing but chewing up black bodies and spitting them out. So to see that happening, but then also to see that there was a whole siege on the Capitol and yet there was no shared responsibility given to all those who participated. Instead it's just kind of like, oh, somebody just happened to die and well, that's just that. So I think that it's important to definitely know what it is that you can and cannot do and knowing that for yourself, but also educating yourself because without that education, then how do you know what
Mhm.
you're capable and not capable of doing?
And I
Yeah.
gotta add in, let's not forget Gomer Pyle. Gomer Pyle's grandmama. I think that's the other thing that's a benefit when you're trying to deal with how people put stuff in your knapsack. Gomer
Yeah.
Pyle's grandma said, no matter how good you are, you can't get an egg from a chicken.
So I'm looking at the time and I do want there to be time for questions. And I think that you all have done a great job of sharing with us, how you all share responsibility
And
and
you've done a good job too. I'm so proud of you.
thank you. Okay, stop. I gotta focus. But Mama, collective care is something that we discussed in our book club, where we just finished Unapologetic, a Black Queer Feminist Mandate for Radical Movements by Charlene Carruthers, which I read a passage from earlier. The question that I have for y'all is how do you, as Black women, and I guess like how can I also as a Black non-binary femme, how can we empower others to share responsibility? Because we know that like we live in a very individualistic society. So how can we empower others to say, hey, I don't mind sharing this responsibility with you. Let's share it. How do we do that?
Sarah, you got the most experience with that. I can tell you for me right now, the best thing that's happening is let me give you a book to read.
Mm,
Let me turn you on. And if you're one of my white people, hey, let me turn you on to Brene Brown, who is one of my few white women that I love, who is willing to say, I don't know everything, but let me at least try to support those who are trying to make a difference. she I love her position where she says, if you're a white male heterosexual Baptist church person, you got the most privilege and got the biggest problems, and until you can open up your eyes, we got issues to deal with. So that's I think that's part of, could you because I'm trying to make sure I'm answering your question.
It's about, yeah, just collective care. How do we empower others to
Yeah,
like share responsibility with
and
us?
everybody has their own thing, but my thing right now is I got my reading list, and and like I said, I'm bringing Angela Davis into the picture more so because when you really read what she went through, not what she said somebody else did, but what she went through, the whole part about the whole thing about the Soledad brothers and how they were bringing up issues about how the black bodies were dying at the jail, and how she was speaking up for them. I think I also use that when I'm dealing with people who want to say that Black Lives Matter is a socialist group.
Mm.
Duh. Okay, so let's get a picture of who's hurting me and who's not hurting me, who
Mm.
wants to hurt me or who doesn't want to hurt me,
It's
or who
one
thinks that black people are responsible. When I said that's the other thing that my issue is about. When you want to tell me what's wrong with a black mother who may not be doing the right thing with her child, I'm going to tell you, where's the policy at where this woman has to work two jobs and the
What does
kids
air
out
travel
roaming
look
on
like
their own?
now?
Everyone.
Sorry,
Was that you?
that was me.
Okay,
Uh,
but that's my thing, is that I got my reading list, and I'll start with Just Mercy, and I'll go through all these, but then I end up dealing with, you know Rachel, what you taught me is possible. Let's deal with it. Our prisons obsolete, and you see who wrote it.
yes, yes, we love
So,
it.
so that's my thing, is that if nothing else, when people want to ask, even if you don't agree with where they're coming from,
Mhm.
hey, just go ahead and read their book. Make them watch To Serve with Love and find out ain't nothing changed. Okay.
I love it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it takes a lot of patience. I think you have to really expect people that you want to share this responsibility with, if they come from privilege, based on their identity and how they move through the world and the society that we've set up. You have to like have a lot of patience and let them do that work for themselves, read the books. Braden has a mini library going, and that is something that, like, I was really, pushing him to do, but also something that now I'm really happy to see he's like taken up on his own, which is like honestly the best way it can go. I think at the same time, though, and this really only is when I think about dealing with people of privilege that I'm trying to like educate, or they come to me asking questions, I listen to what they're asking me and
Mm.
pay attention to the context in which we're having this discussion, because I'll listen and I will hear what you're asking. I'll do my best to help if I can, but I also listen for ways in which like someone's asking me something where I'm like, you're doing this to make yourself feel better. Like
Woo.
you're doing this to get to some end. You feel some kind of way and you think that I'm going to be like your golden fleece. I
Not
don't
your
know where. It's not on my forehead. It's not on the back of my shirt, but like, I'm not your respectability Negro.
ooh,
Uh-oh, uh-oh.
ooh,
You
ooh.
I
gotta see the movie I'm Not Your Negro. You gotta see James Baldwin said it. I'm not your Negro.
and I mean, I
Although
think
he puts it better than that.
there's like, common courtesy. I feel like in general, and for tell me if I'm wrong, like my personality is such that I feel like people are just like, Sarah, oh my gosh, you're so nice and so calm and so patient, or whatever. Rachel, I feel like you probably don't experience this that much.
I mean, I don't experience it, but I can see how people could see that for you.
And I don't think of you as black. When I see you, I'm colorblind to your color.
Mama, now hold on, mama. I
mean,
gotta
that's
pause right there.
something
You're about to take us to a
that's
whole
like two
other
steps ahead of where
conversation.
I'm going.
But we
Uh,
love the
but
energy.
truthfully, like, be a little guarded if you're dealing with someone of a privileged background and they start asking like how they can share responsibility with you,
Mm,
because it may not be about you. It may be
ooh,
about how they see themselves and how they feel about themselves and what they think they should be doing.
mm,
And sometimes, generally, I'm really not in a position where I want to do that unless I know that you have a vested interest or a vested love, affection, appreciation, piece of compassion for me and my people and my struggle. And if I'm not feeling that from you, if I'm not sensing that, if I don't know you from last Tuesday, I haven't talked to you since we graduated high school, and then after the murder of George Floyd, you want to message me on Facebook and ask me if I'm okay, I'm
Bloop,
just
bloop,
gonna
bloop.
pass. You know what? That's not responsibility I feel like I can share with you. Like if you want to build a bridge, I'm not trying to build a bridge over the Atlantic Ocean. I want to
Ooh.
build a bridge over a lake or a river. Someone who's closer to me in that way.
Yeah, and the thing I can also add is that I just remember dealing with some people when I was not working, but I was a member of the junior league, and they were trying to work in a community, a part of the community that needed some resources.
Mhm.
And the biggest training they had to have was that they had to sit on their hands when it came to what the people wanted.
Oh my
Mm,
gosh.
They had to learn you do not know their experiences, you do not know what they are living through, and money didn't buy everything.
mm,
But I was impressed because how many people do you see who just go in and say, I'm here to check off my list. Got this kid who's in, you know, doing whatever and needs some things happening, and I'm going to go buy him some clothes and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And my position has always been, let me be in a position to support the family and see how I can support them rather than to be a substitute piggy bank.
Mm-hmm.
love
And
it.
that takes a lot of strength.
Yeah.
This
So
like harp. Oh, I'm sorry, Rachel.
oh,
Can I
go
just
ahead, go ahead.
this like harps on a specific point for me since I work in sustainability. All of this talk right now is about like, especially with the new administration coming in, climate justice, environmental justice, centering around the people who are mostly affected by the negative impacts of pollution, which are normally black and brown, poor, inner city. Like it's the same wherever you go. And what I keep having to say and what I keep hearing, you know, in meetings and things like that with discussions of people who want to like represent this movement is like you have to center on the voices of people of color. You can't just parachute in and be like, we're going to offer energy efficiency programs for low income folks and hopefully that helps. I'm like, these people can speak for themselves. Like,
Nope.
please don't. Please don't. I'm sorry. I know that has nothing to do with the point, but like it touched on like it's always in the back of my mind.
Oh no, it's gonna lead into the last question that I have of you all. We have about 5 minutes left. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask for folks to go ahead and start using the Q&A function. If you do have a question, I'll try to get to as many as we can before noon. I know that folks have to hop off, but Mama and Sarah, if you all at least don't mind staying like just 5 minutes after, that would be cool. So we
It
talk
depends on what daddy has for lunch.
so we talked a lot about like, you know, we've created pretty much a map, I like to think of it, of how to navigate like responsibility, how we can share it, what we individually take on, what we don't, things of that nature. But the last thing that I really wanted to emphasize is support. So all this talk about responsibility just really has me thinking about that. Black women and femmes carry so much daily, from grief to the burden of educating others to the savior expectation. All of this wrapped up with our identities intersecting. Again, Black woman, Black non-binary femme. That's what I mean when I say intersecting identities. If you all could just tell me in just like a quick sentence or one word, what does support look like when you have so much responsibility, particularly social responsibility, that gets dumped into your responsibility knapsack? What does support look like to you and for you?
Having quiet time and being grateful.
I was gonna say a foot rub and a warm blanket, but I agree. I
Well,
think
you can't have the foot rub.
oh, I have a special blanket that allows for feet rubbing with a blanket.
Okay.
Very nice.
Okay. Is it weighted?
No.
Okay. Cool.
I do think gratefulness, if you're thinking about internal support, I find like reaching for like what's a bright spot in the situation that I can be grateful for. Did I meet someone new? Did I learn something new? It might be like I'm in an apartment and all my pipes have burst and there's leaks everywhere, but at least, I have electricity. There's little things everywhere that you can be grateful for. And I feel like if you're looking for kind of like a quick shot of support, try
Mhm.
to reach for what you're grateful for, make that a reflex. Um, but also like externally, therapy, friends,
Oh,
like reach outside and find those additional structures for support. Um, because truthfully, like no one should be expected to do it all and do it all perfectly and do it all on their own.
mm. That I love it. It brought us back to our passage, and I'm excited. So first, I would just like to take a collective breath with you all, Mama, Sarah. We can breathe in and breathe out. You all came and gave so much to this conversation, and I want to thank you for holding space for this conversation as well as bringing your most authentic selves to this conversation. So thank you so much. As we start to wind down, we do have one question in the Q&A. So as Black women, we know that our people are resilient, but we aren't unbreakable. How do you all feel about the strong Black woman trope slash stereotype? And that's from Sarah Coombs.
I think we have, in order to be truthful, you have to, in order to make sure you don't buy into the stereotype, first of all, make sure you understand why you're doing what you're doing. And you also have to be ready for the fact that what happens if you aren't successful? Like, it's almost like what I said about that judge. What was the worst he was going to do to me? I
Yeah.
have to be ready for the fact that if I'm going to do this and if I'm going to take this stand and I'm going to try to be superwoman, I have to make sure that my continuing to do the good thing that I'm doing is not based on the approval of someone who all they have to do is tell me no. That I
Mm,
think that's the best part is, the begin again. Let me, no matter what happens. I mean, I am excited because I can always remember when, I didn't win my election to be continue doing what I thought I was doing great at. But the part that was the peaceful part was that I was loved when it happened, and I was not alone when it happened. And there were other options out there. Like, you remember, girls, I told you, hey, mama had never been off more than a couple of months when I had you guys. And because your dad was that great place to be at home and help with the caregiving of the children. But I had 18 months to figure out that I was not a good housewife. But I got to rest.
ooh.
I got to put on my pajamas, take my pajamas off when I wanted to, and decide when I was going to take a shower when I wanted to. Although, Rachel was there to kind of wind us up and make us feel shame. But I got to do what I wanted to do. And then I figured out what I wanted to do next. And I got to tell people I felt like Moses in the last part of his life. So therefore, the issue is making sure that what it is you're striving for, your superwoman identity, is not totally connected with approval from other people, and that if you get knocked down, you get back up and keep going.
I mean, I don't have anything to add. That kind of knocked it out of the park. I don't love the stereotype. I think there always needs to be space for vulnerability in anyone's identity. You can't expect someone to show up and just snap their fingers and everything's going to be fine. It's a stereotype that I think has an interesting perception because obviously stereotypes are created by people in power. And so for people in power to think that Black women are just hyper strong and can handle all this stuff, I mean, is kind of cool, but also like you recognize that, like my mom said, it doesn't give you the space to
Mm,
rest and let everyone else's expectations about what they think you should be doing or how you should be doing it or what your track record is and how it relates to that stereotype is, let that just like water off a duck's back. That's none of your
Mhm.
business.
And Rachel, the stuff you attached, that I hope people will dig into and read about, that whole section about the women and every how their policies and lack of policies and everything. These black women didn't create these policies, but we're still rising above those things. So
Mm,
therefore, we have to understand when we look at ourselves and even look at others, don't start with what did they do to put themselves there. As black people, somebody did something. Whether it had to do with them leaving your neighborhood when red light, when it got integrated, black folks didn't leave. The white folks left. So therefore, we have to understand my property value changes because of the color of my skin, but there's no factor that's at calculating how many devaluations happened because white people left. And
mm,
why was it so high when white people were there? What they
look,
do?
it it do
I mean,
it
it's not like they did something special.
and I'm glad that you mentioned that because I wrote I tried my hand at writing a blog post, exciting, for Black History Month, and one thing that I did talk about was like shifting our perspectives, our historical perspectives, and like we talked about it in the like in book club, mom, about how like what if we actually focused, what if we just shifted the camera just 2 inches to the left and we saw, what was going on in regards to black women who were leading the charge in the civil rights movement, that were taking campaigns that were local to international levels. Like I had to do a little bit of research, but like the main three folks that the main three black women that I centered in the post were Marsha P. Johnson, Ida B. Wells, and Reese Taylor and Rosa Parks. All of them were literally the mothers of movements that took it from such an individual space to a larger space that also allowed for them to share with other folks. So I will say that it is 12:02. We do have some folks that are hopping off. I did want to read a couple of comments that were left. One thing that I believe somebody said, this was from Isaac. They said there's a huge difference between being kind and being nice, especially in holding space for these kinds of conversations. Aziz, thanks to you all for sharing so much of yourselves with us. Um, I'm
And
not
tell Isaac I got my cup for him.
sure.
It's all about having a cup of do right.
A couple do right. Someone else said, I think as a black woman, or I think as black women, we have the ability to identify what is strength. For example, our strength could be knowing our limits and having our supports pick up what we can't. We get to rewrite and rename the stereotype. And Daddy, of course, said the super black woman trope is a means by which those who impose it upon them to avoid acceptance of responsibility in their own lives. And the rest are just thanks for folks, for you all showing up. So I will go ahead and say thank you, Mama. Thank you, Sarah. For those who are still on that have Instagram, please feel free to follow the Black Velvet Collective, where I'll be posting highlights from this conversation. This was so much fun. And as
Can I
always,
say one thing? Just
yes.
to add, although there's no replacement for it, I appreciate you having this extension with the intergenerational conversations because that was part of the Garth Hicks Collective when we would sit at the table with Uncle Arliss and Aunt Charlotte and Grandma Mary, Grandma Ruth, and mommy and my mom and dad. And I just want to thank you because that's when we found out like stuff about who had glaucoma and you had to get your eye tested. That's when we found out about how Medicare didn't help you if you had prescriptions, although you could get paid. But I just, and then you had Uncle Arliss doing everything he could with the universities and the alphas. But I thank you for giving us this opportunity to come together and to share and to understand there's a lot to be learned from each other. And we find out that there's some things we've done in the past that affect what we do right now.
All righty. I love you. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Thank you all so much. I will be sharing a recording with staff with you all a little bit later. And if folks have any other questions, thanks, Daddy. If folks have any questions, please feel free to email me. I'll make sure that they get to my mother and my sister. Again, thank you all so much. I love you both dearly. And that's it.